So I want all of you to open the code editor. The website for code editor is code.earthengine.google.com. So open a new tab in your browser and go to this URL. There is a localized version of the code editor for Indian users. So if you are in India, you should use the code.earthengine.google.co.in. For everybody else, that is .com. Right. So let's go and open up this code editor. And once your tab looks like this, you can go and find the repository for GE Water Resource Management. You have clicked on that link to add the course materials. If not, you'll find that in the course material. Once you add this repository, you should see under your readers tab. Please give me a thumbs up once you find the repository here. All right, so you can see there are folders, 7 folders for 7 modules. We're going to expand this first module, and we're going to click on the first script, which says Hello World. The way our modules are structured is we'll start each section with the script named A. So you can see the script name is Hello World. This is A. I'll type some code here. I'll ask you questions, and you will learn some new concept. As I'm explaining the A script, all of you should be looking at my screen. No typing. Just look at it, ask questions, understand the concepts. Everything I'm doing is already in the B script. So if you go to the B script, it already has the completed script. Right, so I'm going to just show you how to build this. You don't need to take notes. It's already there. Right, so we'll start with the A script. I'll build the full script line by line. I'll explain each line. At the end of it, you have an exercise. So if I go to the 1C, you can see there's an exercise here. This is where you'll have to go and type some code and solve this. And this is going to continue throughout the course. We'll start with the next script. I'll explain the concepts. You already have the finished script with you, and we'll do the exercise. Okay. So we'll start with the A script now and learn some basics of JavaScript. This environment that we are working with, this is called the code editor. This is an environment that Google provides to interact with Earth Engine. There are many ways you can interact with the Earth Engine system. This is one way where you can come to this website, log in, and you have a place here where you can type some code. So you can see I've typed some code. This is in JavaScript. This one says print. Print is a function in JavaScript. In a parenthesis, we have typed hello world, which says I want to type this text. And we close the parenthesis and the command. All the commands in JavaScript end with a semicolon. This indicates the command is over. Once it's done, we can click this run button, and the output of this code will be printed here. So this is a very simple code. When you're learning a new language, the first thing you do is you want to print hello world. And in JavaScript, it's very simple. You just say print, open parenthesis, any text, and you print it, and it prints here. If you printed some text or a chart, it'll be printed here in this console tab. If you want to visualize a map or some image, that will be added to the map below. You can see there's a map area below. If you ask to display an image or some polygons, you'll be displayed on this map here. Whatever scripts you write, you can save it into your repository. So on the left side, you have the scripts tab. These scripts are saved in the cloud. It's associated with your account. So, sorry. So if you save a script here and open it in another computer, you'll see the same script. For more advanced users, you will know that each of the script is backed by a Git repository. So if you want to do management with your scripts, you can actually have a full history of each script. So every time you hit save, it saves a copy of the script, and you can access the full history. If you accidentally delete something, you can always recover because it's a Git repository that's backed by it. All right, so we're going to quickly cover some JavaScript concepts or syntax on how to JavaScript works and how to call the API. One of the first things you learn when you are learning a new programming language, you need to know how to define variables. Variables hold some text or numbers, and you can recall the values later. In JavaScript, you can type var to define a variable. And let's say we will define a variable called city. And I'm going to assign this value Bangalore to it. Okay. And let me just print city. what do you think will be the answer? When I print this, what do you think will print? Angular, right? So when you say, give me print the variable, it will print the value that is contained in the variable. What about now? If I say print city in quotes, what do you think it will print? Why the difference? Because when you put something in quotes, that is interpreted by JavaScript as a text. So you say, I want to print a text called city. One of the biggest mistakes done by beginners is you'll put quotes where they're not supposed to be, and you'll forget quotes when they're supposed to be. So here, if you say any variable without quotes, it's going to print the value of the variable. If you put something in quotes, that's interpreted as a text. So let's say we want to define another variable. This time I'll just put some number to it, and we'll print the number. Let's just go print the number. So you can assign a text or a number to any variable, and it's going to print that for you. You can print multiple things together. So you can say, I want to print both city and population together. The print function takes multiple arguments. You can ask it to print as many things as possible, right? It will print both of this together. When you're typing code, if you prefix any command with 2 forward slashes, it will be used as a comment. It will be ignored. So if you want to add any text to your code, which is only for yourself, which is for documentation, you can just prefix with 2 forward slashes. And that means it'll just ignore that. So if I say I'm having a code and I say, I don't want to run this command, I can come and put 2 forward slashes. And you can see that command won't be run because I put 2 forward slashes, it'll be ignored by that. So this is called a comment in JavaScript. You can add any 2 forward slashes, and that statement will be commented out. So we learned about variables. The next thing we want to learn is list. Many times when you're doing analysis, you want to define a list of things. You say, I have a list of watersheds that I want to run this analysis to. So how do I define a list? In JavaScript, you use square brackets. So if you put stuff in a square bracket, that will be interpreted as a list. So let's define a list. I'm going to create a variable called major cities and start a list with a square bracket. And I'm going to give a list of cities in India. So let's say, so these are the 4 major cities in India. And I have created a comma separated list of those values. And I can now print this. And you'll see instead of just having one value in the variable, you have multiple values. There's a question? What? Yeah, so the question is around why I named my variable in a very weird way. This works. You can do this. JavaScript doesn't stop you from doing this. But the convention, a good practice is to name your variables using something called camel case. So the convention in JavaScript is to have all your variables and function names in camel case. So a camel case is like hump of camels, where you start your variable name with a small case and every additional word is capitalized. And this is just a preference that JavaScript has for variable naming. Python has a different convention. So if you work with Python, you prefer underscores. With JavaScript, you prefer capital letters like this in the camel case. So again, if you're working with JavaScript, stick to the convention. The convention also helps because if you look at the documentation, all of the function names of the API are also in the same convention, right? So they also follow camel case. So if you use the variable names as camel case, your code will look more consistent. But again, it's a matter of preference. If you use underscore, it works anyway. There is a, you can see that there is a, when you print a list, you'll see this triangle thing. This is called a zippy. If you expand this zippy, I see these 4 items that I put in the list, but I also see the 0, 1, 2, 3 along with it. This is called an index. These are automatically assigned. This is the position of the item in the list. In JavaScript and also Python, counting starts from 0. So another thing that you have to learn or unlearn counting, that in programming, you start counting from 0. So when you say, I have this list of things, I want the 3rd item. So you'll say, I want to get the item which is index 2 because counting starts from 0. So you can see there are 4 items. The 4th item is index 3. So remember that in JavaScript, indexing is from 0. When you have a lot of items or you have a lot of data, instead of putting it in a list, you may want to give them a label. So let's say I have some data, I want to assign it a label so that I can recall that item with that label. Let's say you have an image and you have some metadata. Each metadata has a name. So you say I have a cloud cover, I have the satellite name, and I want to assign that value, the label. If you have label data, structured data, you can use dictionary to define them instead of a list. In JavaScript, the dictionary uses curly brackets. So these are called curly brackets. And so let's see an example. So I can define a dictionary, and dictionary is 2 values. For each value, you say the value and the label of the value. So I can say I have a label called city, and the value of this is Bengaluru. So that's my first item. Second item, the label is population. The value is 8.4 million. And maybe I have a third item called elevation, and the value is 910. Right? So I put 3 items. Each item has a label. These are called keys and values. So dictionaries have keys, which are labels, and the values, which are the value of the item. Let's print this and see the difference. So I wanted to compare the output of this versus the output of a list. So if you have a list, you have items, doesn't have labels, it just got index, versus a dictionary. You can see each item has a label. So now I want to know the elevation. I can just simply say, give me the elevation value from this dictionary, instead of remembering, was it the first item, was it the second item? So dictionaries are used widely in Earth Engine for things like metadata and storing a lot of structured data around for your image collections. Yeah, so the question is, if I want to extract a particular item from a list using an index, how can I print that? So how do I just extract the index 1? So that requires you to learn more JavaScript than I'm willing to teach you. So, right? So if you will need to do this when you're coding, so you need to do this using the Earth Engine API. So in module 2, you learn, if you have a list, you can create an Earth Engine list object, and then you can extract a list, extract an index value out of it. So again, you don't need to learn anything more than how to define a list in JavaScript. All the other list processing, how do I add an item? How do I remove an item from a list? How do I extract a particular item? All of those can be done using the Earth Engine API. For example, if you wanted to extract, say, index 1 from this list, you would say, what API function can I use? There is a function called, there's a module called elist, and there's a function called get, which says, returns the element at a specified position in the index. So I'm going to teach you in detail, but for now, if you wanted to do this, you would do something like this, e.list. Right? So now you create an Earth Engine API object. Now you can use the function of the Earth Engine API, and you can say get 1, right? And this is going to print Chennai, right? Because that's the item in index 1. There's a question on auto completion. Is auto completion available? Yes, auto completion is available in Earth Engine for the Earth Engine API functions. You don't have auto complete for other variables and stuff like that. So you have the control plus space, which is a shortcut for autocomplete. And for example, if you're doing some work with API, and you can do control space, and you can see suddenly you will get this pop-up like this that will allow you to autocomplete stuff, right? So control space is the keyword, but it finishes the API functions, not the other code. So we'll learn this a little later as we are working with API. There are a bunch of command shortcuts available here. If you click the help button here on the top right-hand corner, there is a general shortcuts section here. This shows all the keyboard shortcuts that are available on the code editor. Quite helpful to learn those. It'll help you be more productive. The one that I use a lot is Control plus Enter. is to run the script. So when I'm typing something, instead of reaching out with my mouse and clicking the run button, I can say Control Enter, and it just runs my code. It's quite helpful to avoid an extra step of reaching out there. But there are many other shortcuts. I'll cover a few of those as we go along. But I try to explore those. Those are also different depending on whether you're on Linux, Mac, or Windows. So look at this help general shortcuts to see the key combinations for your particular platform. All right. One more thing that you need to learn about JavaScript as you are working with Earth Engine is functions. How to define your own functions. We already ran a function, right? We saw print is a built-in function where you can give any value and it prints. There are all the other functions available in the API, but sometimes you define your own functions. So in JavaScript, you need to use the function keyword to create a function. A function is useful because instead of just typing your code and doing one thing, you can say, I will write a function that takes some input, and then your code will use that input to process the input and return an output. So you can have a workflow, which you can put in a function and then say, I want to run this workflow for every image. You don't need to kind of manually call it. You can just call that function and give it an image. It use that input and do the processing. Let's see how you define the function in JavaScript. This is the keyword function. So a function takes 0 or more input. Let's just say this one takes 1 input. We define this input. You do something with the input. You would say, I'll create a new variable called greeting, which is hello plus input, and I'll return the greeting. So a simple function, you give it some input, it'll return hello plus input. How do we call the function? Well, you type the function name and your input. So you can do this. Let's print the output. What do you think will be the output of this? Just saying my function of world. What do you think will be the output?
Hello world.
Hello world, right? Because when we call this, the argument that we're given is world. This will be saved in the variable called input, and then you'll create this greeting and return this. The advantage of the function is if I want to do something different, I can say my function of class. This will say hello class. Right? So I can give different input and I'll get different outputs. I don't need to type that manually. One thing to remember is sometimes you'll forget to return the values. What do you think will happen now when I run this code? It says undefined. Because when you call the function, it did something, but it never returned anything. So you say, I don't know what's the output of this. It's undefined. So when you have a code, a very complex code, sometimes you'll say something odd is happening. I'm doing everything right, but I'm not getting any output. Well, the reason is you might have forgotten the return statement. So if you forget to return your output, you get a null or undefined value. So that's it. That's all the JavaScript you need to learn to use Earth Engine. If you type some code and you can go and save it, the first time you save your script, if you've never done anything in Earth Engine, it's going to ask you to choose a username. Okay? This username is what appears here. It says user/Ujjwal Gandhi/whatever, right? So first time you save your script, it's going to ask you, do you want to create a username? And please choose the username wisely. You can never change it. So if you just name it testing123, you will be always known as testing123 in Earth Engine. Right? So first time you save it, please choose your username carefully. It should be your name or some username that you use. Secondly, it's going to ask you, do you want to create a repository? A repository is a place where you can create some folders and save your scripts. I typically like to have one repository for each course or each project. So for this course, you can create a repository and put it there. I also have a default repository, where I save everything else. So if I'm doing some work, one-off work, I can save it there. You can create folders and script inside of a repository. So if you want to save it, if you try to save this script, it'll say you are trying to save into my repository, which is a read-only repository. I'm not allowed you to write to my repository. So it'll create a new copy of the repository and save it there. So you can do this. But again, all of the stuff we have already done is already in the script, which is the B script. So you don't need to save it for this work, this particular example. Before we move on to exercise, one more thing, sharing. So if you type some code and let's say you got an error. Let's say I got an error like this. Or let's say, let me give an example. Let's say you have code like this. And you get an error, right? So when you get an error, you have this big red boxes. If you hover over the error, it will say what it means, and you can try to interpret that. Sometimes these errors are a bit cryptic, but let's say you got this error and you say, I don't know how to fix it. You want to ask for our help. So what I or Vikram would tell you is send me your script link. You can click this button, which says get link here. So I can click this get link. It generates this long URL. What it did is it took the code that you wrote and encoded this into this one unique string, and you get an URL. So if you copy this and you send it to us or anybody, you get a link that looks like this. If you open it, you will see exactly what the user typed when they got this error. Right? This is a static snapshot. It doesn't change after you do it. So if I go and fix my code, this link doesn't update. It's a static snapshot of the code. But now we can say, oh, you missed a code mark here and it's fixed. And then we can say, I'm going to send you the script with a fixed version. So we can click get link, send you this, and then you can open it and you'll see the fixed version of that. Right? So if you want to share any code with anybody, make sure you click this get link button and you can do this. The get link button has a drop down. Do not click the drop down. Okay, you need to click this button here, and your URL should look like this: code.earthengine.google.com/ this long number. The question is, can we copy the error message as well? The error message is part of the code. So for example, if you share the script with somebody, they will already see those errors. So you can see the errors will already be part of this. If I share this link, the errors will automatically come there. And when they try to run, they'll get the same error, right? So it's kind of all embedded into the same link. You don't need to copy it separately. Also, sometimes if you accidentally sent a link to somebody, and you say, I sent a link, it was my super secret project, I didn't want anybody to know, what do I do, right? So you can go to this drop down. There is this thing called manage links where you can go and delete the link. So it will happen to me. Sometimes I'm very active on public forums. I'm working on some project and I accidentally share the wrong link to thousands of people. And again, you can go and delete that. So if they click on the link, they'll say this link doesn't exist anymore, right? So it helps you delete links which you previously shared. But otherwise, when you click this, it'll create a static public snapshot of your code that is useful for asking for help or sharing your work with others. Let's see another example of a function. So let's say, let's give a simple example with 2 arguments. So let's write a function to add new numbers. Okay. So we'll say, I'll write my function, add numbers. This is the function. As I mentioned, function can take 0 or more inputs. Here, the input of this function would be 2 numbers, right? So we'll say, give me X and Y. You give me 2 inputs. Whatever you give is the first value will be assigned to a variable called X. Whatever the second value will assign to a variable called Y. And the function will do something and will return the sum. Now, how do we sum the numbers? Not XY, because we are doing Earth Engine, right? So I'll again teach you how to add 2 numbers using Earth Engine API later on. For now, let's just say I'm going to write it using the Earth Engine API. This is the API functions to add 2 numbers in Earth Engine. Okay, so we have this function. Let's call this function. We'll just say add numbers. 10 and 20. This is how we call the function. You have two arguments. This 10 will be assigned to X, 20 will be assigned to Y, and you can get the result. So let's just print this. And you can see the answer is 30. Right? So now you can give any two numbers to this function, and it's going to go and give you the sum of those two numbers using the code that you wrote. So you can do 1 plus 5, and we'll just keep it that. Hope that helps. With that, let's move to the exercise. Vigna, you can explain the exercise.